Welcome to Mondays with Maxwell. My name is Mark Cole. I'm the president and CEO of the John Maxwell Leadership Enterprise. I'm so excited to bring you this new series with John. You know, the funny thing about Mondays is there are many people who dread the first day of the work week. I'm sure that's why TGIF, Thank Goodness It's Friday, is such a popular segment. People look forward to the end of the week more than they do the start of the week. I know you're thinking, of course they do, Mark. Who says, thank God it's Monday? I'll tell you. John Maxwell says it. And you know what? He's not the only one. I believe every one of you watching this right now is just like John. You welcome Mondays because you look forward to starting your week off looking for ways to value people, looking for opportunities to add value to people. And you, my friends, are what Mondays with Maxwell are all about. Glengarry Glen Ross said, coffee is for closers. Well, I say Mondays are for leaders. Mondays with Maxwell are for the difference makers who dare to lead their life, not just accept it. Mondays with Maxwell's is for the value multipliers who grow from me to we, from success to significance. Mondays with Maxwell are for the possibilists, who, while the impossibilists are thanking God for Friday, you are praising God for Mondays. PGFM. Mondays with Maxwell are all for you. And since today is Monday, my friends, let's hear from the man of the hour. He is our leader, our friend, John C. Maxwell.
Hi, John Maxwell here. I'm so glad you're with me on Mondays with Maxwell as we continue our Best Advice series. I'm having a blast just sharing with you. In fact, let's just do a quick review. In the last few weeks, we've given some advice such as always bring something to the table. People need recognition, so give it to them very freely. Humility is a most important quality in a leader's life. It's essential for leadership. That was from Ed Bastian, by the way, CEO of Delta. Control your destiny by controlling your dollars. You're only as good as your last book. And in a moment, I'm going to give you some advice from Dan Cathy. But Andrew Manzano, who is, this is his studio. He's one of our John Maxwell team coaches, and we do virtual stuff in here all the time. Andrew reminded me last week on Monday with Maxwell, I didn't give any Andrew advice, and you're probably mad at me because you're already loving that humor of his. And so I'm going to make up for it today since I didn't get one last week. And by the way, I forgot, okay? But it's okay. I'll give you 2 Andrews today, okay? This will just probably put you under, okay? Okay, this is one. This is from Andrew. Advice from Andrew. If you get handed the camera every time a group picture is being taken, either you're a good photographer or you may be the ugly one in the group. Okay. Oh, shoot, that was good. And by the way, if you hear any snickers going on in the studio, it's because I have some of my John Maxwell team coaches in here. In fact, you're going to meet one of them here a little bit later in our teaching. So if you hear any noise like that's just our John Maxwell team coaches, which I dearly love, okay? Oh, here's one more. Okay, the second Andrew advice. Now, Andrew, you ought to be pleased. I'm doing 2 now, so we're catching up with you. By the way, I didn't even realize I didn't use Andrew's advice last week. He came to me and told me, he said, John, that last lesson wasn't as good as the previous lessons because you didn't have my advice in it. And okay, here we go. My grandpa used to say, when one door closes, another one opens. Lovely man. Terrible cabinet maker. Okay, we just love, Andrew, we do really, truly love your advice. The only thing better than your advice is your technology ability and putting together fine work for us in the studio. So thank you very much. This week, advice from Dan Cathy, CEO of Chick-Fil-A, longtime friend. I shared with you in a previous lesson that Ed and Dan and I were playing golf, and I asked them, I said, I'm doing my Mondays with Maxwell now, And the reason I had to make sure they knew it was Mondays with Maxwell is because when I started asking questions, Ed Bastian looked at me, and I'm starting to get my iPhone out, and he said, "Okay, John, you're starting to write a book and not play golf, aren't you?" And so I said, "No, this isn't about writing. This is about Mondays with Maxwell." And I looked at Dan, and I said, "What do you think is the best advice for a leader today?" And Dan Cathy gave some, well, I'm going to give it to you right now. Dan Cathy said leaders need to be self-aware and situationally aware. And so for a few holes on the golf course, I had a mentoring lesson, an advice from a very good leader, all about awareness, self-awareness and situational awareness. In fact, I came away from our time together and I went to a book that I wrote a few years ago called No Limits. And the reason I went to that book is because basically the thesis of that book is that if you grow in your awareness and if you develop your abilities and if you make the right choices, you got that? Grow in your awareness, develop your abilities, make the right choices, you can reach your capacity. Well, the advice that we're talking about in our Mondays with Maxwell, it's all about capacity. It's all about how can we reach our potential. Well, I thought about the No Limits book and how that awareness is so important in your life. I mean, let's face it, you can't fix what you're unaware of. And that reminded me of one of my laws of growth in the 15 Laws of Growth book, which says, it's the law of awareness, by the way, that you must know yourself to grow yourself. And then I began to think about my life and my leadership and the misses that I've had in what I've attempted to do. Because I've had some hits, but I've had some misses. And not all of the misses I've had, but most of the misses have been misses because I assumed something that I just really didn't know. In fact, I look back and I think maybe the mother of all mess ups in leadership is assumptions. That we begin to assume things. That's why I say to leaders all the time, you need to find your people before you lead your people. The first responsibility of a leader isn't to lead others. We got to find them first. But let me say this, I got to find myself before I can lead myself. And I've got to certainly find myself. I've got to be self-aware before I can be situationally aware. I've got to be able to understand me before I can understand you, and I got to be able to understand both of us so that I can understand the mission that we're really trying to accomplish. I can still remember, now my background, as you know, I was a pastor, and I have a degree in counseling. I can still remember in my early years when I did counseling, I wasn't any good at it at all. I wore myself out. I wore the people out. It was terrible. And then I had somebody walk into my life and just absolutely turn the light on for me. I was unaware that counseling wasn't my gift. I was aware that I wasn't good at it. I was aware that it was exhausting me. And they walked into my life and they said, John, you should be an equipper, not a counselor. And then they defined the difference. An equipper works on the strengths of people. A counselor works on the weaknesses of people. That changed my life. That person helped me become self-aware. By the way, I don't think there's such a thing as self-awareness. I think the awareness that I have that I didn't have before is not because all of a sudden I became brilliant. I think it's because somebody loved me enough to come alongside of me and help me with my blind spot. After all, they are called blind spots. So let's talk briefly about self-awareness. Albert Einstein said, once we accept our limits, then we can go beyond them. But we can't go beyond our limitations until we accept them. And let me just say this, we can't accept them until we know them. A few years ago on our exchange, every year through our John Maxwell company, we do an exchange event for leaders, and we do a different city, and we give them leadership experiences. It's a phenomenal leadership time. And we were in San Francisco, and We were listening at that time to Liz Wiseman, who wrote the book Multipliers, and she was talking about how we have gifts and tendencies that multiply our effectiveness. And so she was talking about the multiplying effect. And as she was going through her teaching, I was so excited because I thought, oh, I do that well. And oh, I do that well. And yes! And I was just giving myself 100%. In fact, when she finished with those multiplying tendencies of great leaders, I just want to stand up and say, you can take my picture. You can take my picture. You've just described me. And then the table turned. And she said, with every multiplying strength of a leader, there is also an accidental diminishing quality in their life. I thought, oh my gosh, okay, what does she mean by that? And then she began to explain. She said, if you're a person with optimism, you give you great hope. I'm that kind of a person. She said, the diminishing quality there and tendency is that you ignore people's struggles. And so that you give them boundless enthusiasm without acknowledging their struggle, and they just drowned in your words. And I thought, oh my gosh, okay. I failed that one. And then she went on and she said, well, let's talk about the pace setter. Oh, that's who I am. I'm out in front. We're running the race. I'm setting the pace. And she said, if you're a pace setter, the diminishing tendency is that you're going to constantly leave people behind you. People give up because they can't keep up. Oh, she hit me again. You know, I got 100% on the multiplying tendencies, and I got a 0 on the diminishing tendencies. And it was a great lesson because what did she do? She made me aware. Wow. I think COVID-19, because of the crisis, has brought an awareness to us. One of the things I tell leaders all the time is when difficulty and crisis comes, you're going to very quickly on your team separate the players from the pretenders. That's what happens. And what I really want from Dan Cathy's lesson to all of us today is to help us understand this awareness. Now Dan is like myself. He's a person of faith. And so when I said, okay, to stretch out self-awareness, stretch out situational awareness, he referred to an Old Testament story of Joshua, who had the privilege of leading the children of Israel into the Promised Land. And Dan said, you talk about self-awareness and situational awareness. He said God spoke to Joshua one morning and said, Moses, the leader that you've had for all these years, is dead. And Joshua was the heir apparent. He was going to be the next leader of the children of Israel. And it's like, okay, here comes reality, okay? And reality is you've had 40 years of wandering in this wilderness. You have a whole bunch of past failures in your life. And Big Mo died. And now all of a sudden, you're in charge of this situation. And in fact, he said, I want you to get going. In other words, get going? In other words, do what Moses was unable to do? You mean do what the Israelites were unwilling to do? You want me to get going? And this became a testing time in Joshua's life. Now, by this time, as we're playing golf, Dan Cathy is just in a real kind of like Old Testament teaching mode. And he said this was Joshua's testing time as leader. He had to be self-aware of who he was, and he had to be situationally aware of what he had to do to help the children overcome a past failure that they had lived with for 40 years. Now, I'll come back to that in a moment. But here's the question I have for all of us. Is my inside strength greater than my outside challenges? In other words, am I bigger on the inside than I'm on the outside? And if you'll just give me a moment, I could talk about faith, but if you're not a person of faith, you know that doesn't matter to me. You're my friend. I love you unconditionally, okay? But how about your values? You see, for me, I have faith, God, and I have values. It's called double strength core for me. You see, an empty bag won't sit up straight. Never has, never will. You put an empty bag outside, it falls over, a little bit of wind, and it's gone. And people without values or faith, they have a tendency to be empty. And we need to be filled. And Dan said that day, Joshua needed to be filled. His bag needed to be filled so that he could have the self-awareness and the confidence to say, I can do this, and he could have the situational awareness to lead the children of Israel to say, we can do this. And so now, if you'll allow me, out of the message, I'm just quoting just a couple of things out of the Old Testament. These are the words of God to Joshua. I'll be with you. I won't give up on you. By the way, as I give you these words, just think how they must have filled Joshua on the inside. I'll be with you. I won't give up on you. I won't leave you. Strength, courage. You're going to lead this people to inherit the land that I promised to give their ancestors. Give it everything that you have, heart and soul. Have strength, have courage. Don't be timid. Don't get discouraged. God, your God, is with you every step of the way. That self-awareness of who he was because he had values and faith on the inside allowed him to be situationally not only aware of the challenge of leading people who had lived beneath their own privileges for 40 years, it gave him the confidence that transferred and was contagious to the children of Israel until literally in just a few days, they did what they hadn't done for 40 years. And what Dan Cathy was saying is leaders in a time of crisis, leaders during this time, they need to be self-aware and they need to be situationally aware. Because a crisis, we hear people say all the time, that crisis will make you, that adversity will really make you stronger. And I always want to stop saying, no, not necessarily. Makes a lot of people weaker. Makes a lot of people give up. You see, an adversity crisis, it doesn't reveal who you are. A crisis doesn't make you better. Adversity doesn't make you stronger. It just reveals who we are. Again, my friend Ed Bastian said when we were talking about values, Ed said to me, he said, John, when COVID-19 came, it was too late to get your values. You had to have them on the front end. So when the difficult time came, you could stand, you could be strong. In other words, values on the inside have a way of showing up on the outside. Dan Cathy that day was teaching me, as I'm passing it on to you, that leadership really is successful when we are self-aware of who we are because we have good stuff on the inside that allows us to be situationally aware and meet the needs of the people. Let me tell you a closing story about Dan. It was that same, no, it wasn't the same day. I started to say it was the same day. It was another day that Dan and I played golf. Okay. We were at my golf club, and we were going to have lunch before we went out. And so I took Dan over to a really nice buffet that they have every noon at lunch. And I said, we can order off the menu or you can have the buffet. He said, oh, this looks good. And so I said, well, go first. I mean, I'm the host, go first. And so he, filled his plate up and went over his table. And so now I'm going through the buffet, filling my plate up. And while they're doing that, I noticed that Dan's back over and he's standing beside me. And I looked at him and said, oh, I'm sorry, Dan. I said, here, did you forget something? And because I was going to let him back in and, maybe there was something he wanted to pick up that he didn't get the first time. He said, oh, no. He said, I'm good. He said, I'm just waiting on you. I said, okay. And so when I filled my plate up, I turned around to just take it, walk it over to the table, and there's Dan with his hands out like this. And I just handed him the plate because that's what he wanted. He turned around, took the plate over and set it there at my part of the table, place of the table, pulled my chair out, had me sit down, pushed the chair in, got the napkin, put it on my lap, sat down, and we started to eat. Now, don't miss this. Chick-Fil-A is known for the culture of serving, of adding value to the customer, my pleasure. But that's not a brand that's just successful that makes Chick-fil-A be who they are. You see, it's who Dan Cathy is. don't miss this. And in fact, sometimes people come to me and they say, well, help me with branding. And I say, well, I'm probably not really good with that. We got a lot of people at the John Maxwell Company that are good with that, but it's really not who I am. I'm not that good. But I do say this to them. Why are you so concerned about branding? Why don't you just get good? Because if you're good, then the brand will really work. But if you're really not good, that brand isn't good enough to pull you through and keep the customer happy. You see, Dan lives what his company advertises. It's in him. It's who he is. It makes him authentic, but it also makes the message of his organization authentic. And I think that's kind of a huge advice for me. I think it's huge advice for you. And very simply, are we living out our message that we advertise that we are? So that day, on the golf course, Dan Cathy just simply said, hey, if you want to lead well during this time, be very self-aware and be situationally aware. We can do those two things, we'll succeed. You can just bank on it. And let me just share something else with you. I have a John Maxwell team member that I want you to meet. And you will be greatly encouraged by what this person is doing and what this person is learning and how it's helping them become better. And the reason that I want you to listen to them for a moment with me is because I think that some of you are just like that person. And you might say, hey, I'd like to be part of the John Maxwell team. I sure would love to have you be part of our family. Thanks for being with me today on Monday with Maxwell. Now listen to one of our coaches. Hi, John Maxwell here. I'm with one of our John Maxwell team coaches. Her name is Tessa, and you're from Canada, right?
I am.
What
yes.
part of Canada?
Ontario.
Ontario, Canada. And Tessa has a wonderful husband and 2 children. Mm-hmm. And when did you become a John Maxwell team coach?
I joined the team in December of 2018.
Okay. So you've been with us a few years.
I have.
Glad you're part of the team, part of our family. Okay, talk to me. Why did you join Tessa, and what benefits has it been that you become a part of the John Maxwell team?
Well, I had been studying you for quite a few years without realizing that this even existed. And in 2018, I picked up the 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth, which is the best book, and everyone needs to read it, by the way, because it changed my life.
Thank you.
And when I read that book, at the back, there was an invitation to join the team. And so I was like, what is this team? And I went to your website and I discovered the John Maxwell team. And I reached out to someone who I had met a year ago to say, tell me a little bit more, and should I join? And after a brief conversation with him, I decided it was the right fit, and I jumped in, and here I am.
And has it been a good experience for you?
It has changed my life. I mean, when I say that, I'm not exaggerating. It completely changed my life. I, learned so much from you and from our mentors. And so I am now, shifted my focus working with teams and organizations, which I've always wanted to do, but never had, the bravery to go and do it or the courage to go and do it. But the team allowed me to do that.
And Tessa, you shared with me earlier that you're an entrepreneur and a business lady, and now you're full-time as a John Maxwell team member, and that means you're consulting with companies, right?
I am, yeah. I was working mainly with entrepreneurs when I started. For about 6 years, I was doing that. And when I joined the team, I really wanted to work with leaders and organizations. And as I said, I just didn't feel like I was worthy or I was able to do that. And by leaning in and just being a part of the team and growing and taking risks and jumping and, as Chris always says, learn a little, do a little, I really grabbed on to doing a little. And it led me to working with teams and organizations, and I'm able to make an impact in their organizations.
This is so exciting. And the reason I wanted you to meet Tessa is because I have a feeling that some of you are just kind of like her. You're already doing well, but you would really like to make a difference in people's lives. And when Tessa joined our John Maxwell team, she got into an environment that gave her confidence, would you say, that gave you kind of that push that you needed with good training, with maybe even a good name, John Maxwell. Did that work for you?
The best name, actually, yes.
And has that opened some doors, being a John Maxwell team certified coach?
It has, yeah. It definitely, I mean, your credibility and the value that you bring to the leadership world and to the business world in general, right? It's really helped me to grow and learn. And our mentors, as I said, are, I think, the most amazing in the world. And so being able to use that to help me has been incredible.
Tessa, you make me proud. Thanks so much for being part of our John Maxwell family, John Maxwell team. I sure would love to have you join our team too.
So now we see there is good advice and Andrew advice. Let's call that unadvice. I hope you've enjoyed today's Monday with Maxwell lessons. What's some good advice or some unadvice you've received? Let us know in the comments. And what can we say about our John Maxwell team members? Every day, they look for ways to lead in and live out Maxwell leadership principles and philosophies. We're so grateful for the John Maxwell team. Each week, we'll feature a member or mentor from our team who will share their story and their journey with you. Why? Because we want you to see the real stories of difference makers, of value multipliers, and of possibilists. If you want to learn how you too can join John's team of difference makers, go to mondayswithmaxwell.com. Let me say that again. It's Mondays, plural, mondayswithmaxwell.com. Let us know how you saw Mondays with Maxwell and how you want to make a difference. Thank you again for watching today. We'll see you next week for another episode of Mondays with Maxwell.
Andrew Manzango, of my wonderful friend, Andrew Manzango. Andrew Manzango, who is